Merry Christmas, everybody. I know it's past Christmas, Christmas is over, but it's still December, so I have one more Rankin Bass film to talk about, and this is a weird one. The Year Without a Santa Claus. Now, The Year Without a Santa Claus is an interesting one to talk about because it came out in 1974, so a few years after the last movie I talked about, and it really doesn't follow the same formula that I've been talking about, where you take a classic Christmas song and turn it into a movie. But what this movie does instead is take a children's book, a picture book that's very short, and adapts it into stop motion in the Rankin Bass style. And if you thought that adapting a book instead of a song will give it a more cohesive directional plot, well, that's not really the case here, because for one, the book that's based on doesn't really have a lot of plot to begin with, and two, this is a Rankin Bass production, so you know that there's no shortage of creativity here, and for better or worse, we get some pretty out there concepts, like the Miser Brothers. But this movie starts out pretty simple enough for a Rankin Bass Christmas special. We start at the North Pole, we see all the elves, and we see Santa and Mrs. Claus, and Santa is once again played by Mickey Rooney, and Mrs. Claus in this version is played by Shirley Booth, and she kind of narrates and takes charge of the story because Santa is not feeling well. That's the whole point of this movie. He's sick, he's in bed, he's not feeling great, and he's got to take the day off even though he only really works one day a year, and this is the day when he's calling in a sick day. But after a few unkind words from the North Pole doctor telling him to just give it all up and stay home, nobody believes in you, he feels kind of down and out, and he takes that to heart, and he's not really feeling it, so he's calling off Christmas. Christmas is canceled, Santa's not coming to town, but Mrs. Claus isn't just going to sit idly by while Santa takes the day off. No, she's going to concoct some scheme behind his back to get the spirit of Christmas back in him, to let him know that the kids of the world do believe in him and that Christmas is worth fighting for. So she commissions what might be the elf version of Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. I don't know, when I see these guys I always just think of Bert and Ernie. But their names are Jingle and Jangle Bells, and they're a couple of Christmas elves, and they hop on one little reindeer, Vixen, and they go down to Southtown, USA to see if they can stir up some Christmas spirit and find somebody that actually believes in Santa Claus. And it's around here where this special gets really weird, because with this special the plot is very thin. The elves are looking for Christmas cheer in the south, and Santa's not feeling good, and maybe if there's enough Christmas spirit, Santa will actually come to town on Christmas Eve. That's about it. So how do we fill the rest of this runtime? Well, with a bunch of songs, and it's customary for Rankin Bass specials to have a bunch of original songs, and this movie has that, and there's a bunch of really catchy ones, even though the first one that we get is called I Could Be Santa Claus, and it's sung by Mrs. Claus putting on the red suit and the hat and fantasizing about being her husband. It's kind of sweet if you don't think about it for too long. Then we don't really get a song for a while until the I Believe in Santa Claus song, and that's sung at the house of Ignatius Thistlewhite. And Ignatius, or Iggy as he goes by here, he's, a kid in Southtown, USA, and the Christmas elves already visited him, and he told them that he doesn't believe in Santa Claus, that that's just for little kids, he's too old. But when Santa inevitably comes down in disguise, which is really no disguise at all, but he comes down to help get these elves out of some trouble and rescue Vixen, who's just not feeling well because of the hot air. But he stops by Iggy's house and ends up having him confirm his fears that, yeah, he doesn't believe in Santa Claus. So then him, his dad, and his mom all sing this song around the table about how they believe in Santa Claus like how they believe in love, that it's the most beautiful thing in the world and you gotta believe. And while I'm sure as a little kid you watch it and you're like, oh, this is sweet, but watching it as an adult, wow, they're really pressuring this kid into believing in Santa Claus. But while Santa's singing this song, you have the elves getting into even more trouble with a dog catcher and the mayor, and through a few conveniences and a very thin plot, the mayor agrees to release Vixen from the dog kennel if the elves can make it snow on Christmas Eve in Southtown, which of course they agree to, and they're all excited, but then they realize they don't know how to make it snow. They don't have that power. And this is where we come to probably the most famous part about this special. Honestly, it's probably the only reason anybody even watches this special anymore, remembers this special, because the Miser Brothers are such iconic characters in both design and personality and just overall presence that I think a lot of people forget that this is the special that they came from. Because honestly, the rest of the movie is not anything all that special, but it's here where we go to Snow Miser and he looks like a frozen Jack Frost mixed with the Joker, and he sings this big theatrical musical number about who he is and what he does, even though it's all pretty self-explanatory. But the song is catchy, and it's probably the best song in the special, if I'm being honest. But as much as Snow Miser would love to have it snow on Christmas Eve in the South, unfortunately that region is controlled by his brother Heat Miser. So then they all have to go to Heat Miser's place, and he sings the exact same song Snow Miser sang, but the Heat version, which is kind of fun, but also a little monotonous. But I can't really complain because it is catchy and it's creative, and the way they swap the lyrics because it's heat instead of snow and all the different details that change because of that actually does a lot to give the song kind of its own identity, where we're not just hearing the same song again. And when they talk to Heat Miser, they realize that they're at an impasse, because in order for Heat Miser to give up Southtown for a day, he wants Snow Miser to give up the North Pole and have some warm weather there, which obviously neither one is going to go for. So then Mrs. Claus gets an idea. She's going to go over their heads. So they go to Mother Nature. And yeah, that's actually a pretty clever idea. And honestly, all the stuff with the Heat Miser, the Snow Miser, the world building, the mythology of all this is really why I go back to these Rankin Bass specials time and again. Because the storyline's nothing all that remarkable. The animation definitely not top tier high quality, but what they do deliver on almost every time is that Christmassy atmosphere, likable characters, memorable faces and designs, all wrapped up in catchy songs and really creative world building. The North Pole, Sombertown, Southtown, USA, all these places have such an identity and have such a tactile feel, and a lot of that's probably because of the stop motion and that's actually stuff that they built. It's actually there. It's not CGI. It's not a cartoon. Well, except for Frosty. And I would say that this special peaks when they visit Mother Nature and they get all the Miser Brothers stuff sorted out, because after that, you really don't see the Miser Brothers again. Back to the North Pole, Santa's still not feeling well. Is Santa even gonna make the trip? But then all the children of the world declare Santa a national holiday, so they all send him letters and presents. And honestly, that's a pretty heartwarming and satisfying message for the kids. And if that ended there, I'd say it's a surprisingly heartfelt special that kind of ends on a sour note. Santa does stay home, they don't get presents, but all the kids realize it's not about getting the presents, it's about giving back. And isn't that what Christmas is all about? Except it doesn't end there, because one little brat sends him this blue Christmas card about how sad she is because Santa's not coming and how she'll be crying. And you hear her singing "I'll Have a Blue Christmas" in this very melancholy tone. And that gives Santa the kick in the pants guilt trip that he needed to get off his butt and deliver those presents to all those boys and girls so that they can have a Merry Christmas. And that's exactly what happens. You see Santa going down Southtown, down Santa Claus Lane, and you hear a version of "Here Comes Santa Claus" while he's giving out gifts. And kind of like how in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, that song was incorporated at the very end of the special. It's kind of the same thing with "Here Comes Santa Claus," and it's fine. It's probably the most recognizable non-original song in this special, aside from "I'll Have a Blue Christmas." And while it is a nice happy ending, the cynical part of me always kind of wished that the movie ended maybe 10 minutes earlier, where Santa got all the gifts, because that way you get the whole message about giving and not receiving, but also it does still fulfill the whole issue of belief. Do the children of the world believe in Santa Claus in the first place? Do they care? And not only do they care, they actually care enough to forsake all the gifts that they would receive and give it to Santa. And even though it's not your traditional happy ending, I do think it would be stronger and make this special more memorable as a whole, even though it does end on kind of a bittersweet note, to where it's not just remembered as the birthplace of the Miser Brothers. And the Miser Brothers are great, and again, the special peaks whenever they're on screen. They are definitely the highlight of this special. But as for the rest of it, it's kind of forgettable, not that impressive. And even though the model design, the model work, the animation is continually improving as these specials go on, I can only assume that the budgets for these have gone up increasingly over the years, where now they are fully clothed and textured and articulated puppets with so much more detail. And you can really see that here in the model of Santa Claus. You compare that to the model from Rudolph and it's just night and day. I don't know, for me this one's just kind of okay. It's not bad, it's definitely not one of their worst. There's definitely effort and creativity and ingenuity in this, but this is more of the middle of the road, safe Rankin Bass special that you can put on and you can enjoy, but you're not really going to get that much out of it. Your kids may forget about it before next year rolls around, so take that for what it's worth. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about The Year Without a Santa Claus? Is it something that you would watch every year, or is it one of those forgotten ones that only people bring out if it's part of a collection or if it's on TV once every 5 years? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.